Recently, it was confirmed that Nicholas Latifi, who alongside Lance Stroll is one of the only Canadians on the grid, will not be remaining at Williams for the 2023 season. Latifi is currently in 21st in the Drivers' Championship, which is only meant to feature 20 drivers, but because he's currently behind Nyck De Vries in the standings, he's in 21st. To put this into perspective, De Vries has only started one race so far this season, and it was with Williams. He was standing in as Latifi's teammate as Alex Albon was ill and was forced to miss the Italian Grand Prix with appendicitis. So it's pretty safe to say Latifi hasn't had the best or even a decent F1 career so far, with his most memorable moment being an era-defining crash. However, it's not like Latifi's had a lack of time to show his talent. He is currently in his third F1 season and has scored points at just 2 of the 55 races he started in, with the point scoring outings coincidentally coming in consecutive races. Sure, Latifi has had one of, if not the worst car in the field in every single Grand Prix he has entered, but he has consistently been outperformed by his teammates. He got a great F1 experience before being signed to a race seat, with Latifi completing in 5 free practice sessions for Racing Point in 2018, and then 6 practices for Williams in 2019. After finishing as a runner-up in the 2019 FIA Formula 2 Championship, which was his 3rd straight season in the series, Latifi was signed to race for Williams in 2020. His F1 career had gotten off to a poor start, surprisingly due to no fault of his own. Latifi, his team, and the entire F1 paddock have flown out to Melbourne for the season-opening Australian Grand Prix in mid-March of 2020. However, just a matter of hours before the first practice session was supposed to begin, the event was cancelled due to the coronavirus pandemic. This meant that Latifi had to wait nearly 4 months more than was planned before his F1 debut, but eventually his debut did come at the Austrian Grand Prix. Latifi started the 2020 season as he meant to go on, qualifying in 20th with a time of almost 6/10 slower than his teammate George Russell. At the 16 races at which Russell and Latifi were teammates in 2020, Russell outqualified Latifi at all 16 of them, with the average margin being 5.5 tenths. For one of the races, Latifi had Jack Atkin as his teammate. Atkin had only had 1 free practice session in F1 before being called up to compete in a Sakir Grand Prix, and so many fans expected Latifi to smash him in qualifying. Whilst Latifi managed to outqualify his teammate for the first time in 2020, the gap was embarrassingly just over a tenth. Latifi ended the 2020 season pointless and 21st in the standings, the last of any driver to start every race. His most notable moment from the season was being involved in a large crash in the Tuscan Grand Prix. The following season, Latifi remained with Williams, who had a slightly more competitive car. He still had Russell as his teammate, but wasn't completely washed out in qualifying again. However, Latifi only managed to outqualify Russell at 2 of the 22 rounds. One of the 20 rounds at which Latifi was outqualified by Russell was the Hungarian Grand Prix, where Latifi had finished 5 laps behind the leader of the previous year. Remarkably, he finished the 2021 race ahead of Russell and in the points, with Latifi in 7th ahead of Russell, who was in 8th. The following race was the farcical 2021 Belgian Grand Prix, at which half points were awarded. Latifi managed to score a single point, finishing 9th, whilst his teammate scored a podium. The most notable moment of Latifi's F1 career came at the final round of the 2021 season, which was the infamous Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. On the 53rd lap of the race, Latifi crashed at the Yas Marina circuit at the 14th turn. This brought out the safety car with just 5 laps remaining. Ultimately, this allowed Max Verstappen to overtake Lewis Hamilton and win his first ever world championship. And while sure, it was really the rules that were applied that led to the ending we got of the thrilling season, many fans still blamed Latifi. He received lots of abuse and even some death threats, which is just unacceptable. However, Latifi did receive lots of support from other drivers and fans when the true extent of the abuse surfaced. This abuse could be one of the reasons for Latifi's poor performance since this crash, as he may be stressed about every time he's in a battle. Latifi held the Williams seat coming into the season, likely due to the fact that his father is a big sponsor for the team. The new rules gave Latifi and Williams a chance to move up in the field, despite losing George Russell, who was a big asset to the team. Latifi's teammate for this season would be Alex Albon. Albon has scored points at 3 races, whilst De Vries has scored points at 1 of his races. Meanwhile, Latifi is yet to score a single point, with his best finish being 12th, meaning that he is ahead of Nico Hülkenberg in the Drivers' Championship. The announcement that Latifi wouldn't be a Williams driver next season came just after his embarrassing defeat to Nyck De Vries. But it was expected that this would eventually happen, even before the Italian Grand Prix. Latifi had a chance to improve this season with a new car that behaves differently, but he stayed around the same level whilst his teammate has managed to put in some great performances and score some points for the team. Williams will want to move up in the order in the second year of this current regulation period, and so to do that, they're going to have to remove their weak links. Even if their weak link comes across as a lovely guy in in interviews and media. Whilst the team will be losing the funding that Latifi brings, they will also be able to fill a vacant spot with a great driver. Nyck De Vries is most likely the best candidate, but there are some other options of who could also score the seat. If Nyck De Vries did sign for Alpine instead of Williams, Logan Sergeant could get the call up to F1. The American F2 driver is part of the Williams Academy, and he's had an impressive career so far. Some other dark horses for the vacant seat are current F1 drivers Mick Schumacher, who is expected to be let go by Haas at the end of the season, or Daniel Ricciardo, who's confirmed to be leaving McLaren at the end of the season to make room for Oscar Piastri. Alpine's original plan was to pay for the seat at Williams for Piastri and eventually give him the seat at Alpine when Alonso retires. However, Alonso and Piastri both decided that they were going to leave this team, so this plan could no longer happen. Therefore, Alpine could try and secure the Williams seat for Jack Doohan, who is supported by the team and races in F2. Many fans will feel that any of these drivers are better than Latifi, but it's clear that the Canadian driver does have some talent as he finished as a runner-up in Formula 2. However, the 2019 Formula 2 season was one of the weaker ones in recent memory. Latifi has also struggled in F1 as he's had two very strong full-time teammates, both with more F1 experience than him. Russell already had a year with Williams before Latifi joined, and Alex Albon raced for both Toro Rosso and Red Bull before joining Williams. Russell and Albon have both excelled at Williams, showing that the poor car does at least have some potential to challenge the midfield. That being said, Latifi's poor performance might have just made these other drivers look great. Because if both of the drivers were slow in the car, it would just be assumed that the car was terrible, such as the 2019 Williams or the 2021 Haas. In every race that Latifi has scored points, of which there's only been 2, his teammate has also scored points. Russell scored 2 more point finishes than Latifi in 2019, whilst Albon has scored points at 3 more races than Latifi in this season. Latifi's career total of 7 points scored is the same amount of drivers' championships that Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher have, and it looks like Latifi won't be adding to that grand total in the last few rounds we have this season as he's continuing to struggle. And the next 2 rounds will be particularly tricky for him as he hasn't raced in either Singapore or Japan in F1. The Singapore Grand Prix is known to be one of the most physically demanding on the calendar for the drivers, and so if he hasn't trained intensely, it could be one of the most embarrassing weekends on his F1 career, of which there are many to choose from. Currently, one of the most embarrassing moments in Latifi's F1 career came after he impressively topped the first practice session for this season's Hungarian Grand Prix. Granted, Latifi topping the session was mainly due to the time at which he set the lap on a drying track, but it offered his fans and supporters some hope for the weekend. However, in the qualifying session, Latifi was the slowest, and he started the race from the back of the grid. This is an example of one of the key problems with Latifi's F1 career so far. He has failed to back up or capitalize on the very few positive moments that he has had. Instead, he goes into every weekend with a chance at points seeming very small. He's never been able to build momentum between races or seasons, and his F1 career is coming to an end without many fans caring, as he's failed to show that he deserves a seat. So it seems pretty certain that his future is likely to be outside of F1, as any team that doesn't desperately need any more sponsors is likely to stay away from Latifi. However, the potential millions of dollars that Latifi brings with him will be attractive to teams in other racing series, therefore he has many options as to where he could go next, and also maybe attempt to be more competitive. And potentially he could be winning races or taking podiums again like in his F2 seasons. One option for him could be to move closer to his home and race in the NTT IndyCar Series, which is a North American single-seater series that has many transferable skills with F1. This move has worked well for tons of other drivers that have left F1, such as Romain Grosjean and Alexander Rossi. Another driver who left F1 and went to IndyCar is Marcus Ericsson. Ericsson spent 5 seasons in F1 and failed to score points in 3 of them, scoring just 9 points in either of the other 2. Ericsson's F1 career was much like Latifi's, failing to get any noticeable results and remembered as a meme thanks to Grosjean saying, "I think Ericsson has hit us." Since moving to IndyCar, Ericsson has won multiple races, including the world-famous Indy 500, which he won this year. IndyCar is a far closer to spec series than F1 and would give Latifi the chance to show his true skill in wheel-to-wheel combat, as well as try his hand at oval racing. Ericsson's best driver championship finish in his 5 F1 seasons was 17th, whilst he's finished 6th in the last 2 IndyCar seasons. The chance at racing in and winning the Indy 500 is also a dream for any racing driver, and Latifi would be immortalized for all the right reasons if he was able to take home the famous victory at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This potential move would also ensure that Latifi has a home to race in for 2023, as IndyCar's schedule has been announced and features a race in Toronto, which is where Latifi grew up. There are still some seats on the IndyCar grid for next season, and so Latifi can make this his new home for next year. This move would also allow him to compete in non-IndyCar races, such as the 24 Hours of Daytona or the 12 Hours of Sebring. Another move that Latifi could make that ensures that he would continue racing in single-seater cars would be making the move to Formula E, which is an all-electric racing series. Formula E will feature a brand new set of rules and regulations next season, which will see the cars change totally. This will mean that the current Formula E drivers will have to adapt to new cars, and this could lead to rookies having a chance to compete at the front of the series. This leveling of the playing field, along with the fact that Formula E uses spec chassis, would allow Latifi a better chance at scoring points than Antonio Giovinazzi, who also joined Formula E after leaving Formula 1 last year. Giovinazzi has struggled in Formula E, as the majority of the drivers had far more experience than him, due to the fact that it was the final year of the Gen 2 regulations. There are currently 9 free seats in Formula E for the next season, including C at Neo 333, alongside Latifi's former F2 teammate Sergio Sieto Camara. The move from F1 to Formula E has worked well for other drivers, such as John-Eric Verne, Stoffel Vandoorne, and Lucas de Grassi. One other option that Latifi could try is to remain in the F1 paddock as a reserve driver. He would likely have to bring sponsorships to the team if he wanted to secure the role of this nature, but it could give him more F1 experience in the future. So yes, Latifi has been dropped by Williams, a decision that many fans will feel was long overdue. He leaves a seat which will likely be filled by a young star and will find it very tough to get back onto F1 grid in the near future. He can try and cling on to the F1 dream by taking a non-racing role, but if he wants to continue racing and creating a positive legacy for himself, he needs to move into another series where he can get solid results at every round. The stigma around being a paid driver will follow him wherever he goes, and he has to perform if he wants to get rid of it. Latifi has shown some signs of pace so far in his career, but he needed to stand out in his 2023 season if he wanted to be regarded as one of the top drivers in motorsports. His F1 legacy is one of crashing, but he has a few more races to try and go out with a bang and try and secure a top 20 finish in a 20-driver series. What's your opinions on Latifi? I mean, I've never really rated him, and I don't think many people have. The memes are funny, but that's about it. And who do you think is going to replace him? I think it seems pretty obvious it's Nyck De Vries, as Mercedes will literally pay for him to be in any of their other teams, but it could be somebody else, so who do you think?